Was Johnny Appleseed real? The untold origins behind the legend reveal a man far more complicated than the peaceful pioneer we all learned about in school. Most of us picture him barefoot, carrying a tin pot on his head, happily planting apple trees across the American frontier. But beneath this charming image lies a story of land claims, hard cider, spiritual missions, and even government interference. What if Johnny Appleseed wasn't just a kind wanderer spreading fruit, but someone playing a hidden role in shaping the wild frontier's very identity? If you're curious about the true legacy of this American folk hero and want to uncover the dark truths behind the myth, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button now. Your support helps us dive deeper into the stories you thought you knew. Stories full of twists, secrets, and hidden meanings. Join us as we peel back the layers of history and explore the contradictions of Johnny Appleseed's life. A life that challenges everything we believe about legends, truth, and the roots of American culture. You probably remember him from a schoolbook illustration, barefoot, wearing ragged clothes, a tin pot on his head, and a small satchel full of apple seeds. He walks peacefully across green hills, planting trees and smiling at children. Johnny Appleseed, the wandering saint of American soil, a gentle figure who lived in harmony with nature. He didn't fight wars, didn't chase wealth, didn't build cities. He just gave apples. A perfect symbol of American simplicity and kindness. But what if this charming image was never the full story? The myth grew stronger over time. Children's books call him a hero of nature. Statues were built. Festivals celebrated his life. He became a mascot of peaceful colonization, proof that expansion didn't always come of violence. In school plays, he was a kind, barefoot man who wanted everyone to eat healthy fruit. Even cartoons painted him as someone who avoided conflict and carried only goodness in his hands. But history isn't a fairy tale, and even apple seeds can hide bitter roots. Curiously, almost no one asked why a man would spend decades walking alone, planting trees. No one questioned why he avoided towns, rarely bathed, and kept no home. His oddities were turned into charm. His silence became wisdom. But the truth begins to unravel when we look at what kind of apples he planted. And why? The trees Johnny left behind weren't made for eating. They weren't sweet. They were sour, acidic, almost inedible. So why plant them? That simple question cracks open the shell of the legend. Because those apples were perfect for one thing: fermenting. The frontier didn't want apples for pie. It wanted alcohol. Hard cider was the safest and cheapest drink settlers could make. And Johnny, whether knowingly or not, became a supplier for that thirst. The image of the saint who spread fruit begins to shift. Maybe he wasn't feeding people. Maybe he was fueling something else entirely. Still, the story stuck. Over generations, Johnny became a symbol not just of nature, but of innocence itself. But when a story is told too many times the same way, it often means something is being hidden. Why did America rewrite his mission? Who erased the real apples and why? And what was Johnny really running from or toward in the wild frontier? The trail he left wasn't just of orchards, it was of contradictions. John Chapman, the real man behind Johnny Appleseed, wasn't just a drifter. He was born in 1774, during the dawn of a new American identity, a time when the frontier was seen as both promise and punishment. The American government had one goal: expand west. But land didn't come freely. Settlers needed to prove they were cultivating it to legally claim it, and planting fruit trees was one of the easiest ways to do that. John understood this rule early. Plant a tree, own the land. And so he walked, but not for charity. He was no fool. Chapman moved ahead of settlement waves, often reaching new territories before formal land surveys began. By planting orchards in strategic locations, he wasn't just giving away seeds. He was staking real estate claims before the government could. He sold saplings to incoming settlers and earned money doing so. He even built fences around some of his orchards, not to protect the apples, but to mark territory. Suddenly, the barefoot wanderer looks more like a cunning entrepreneur operating in a legal gray zone. But there was another reason for his success: cider. The apples he planted weren't for eating. They were small, bitter, and packed with tannins, ideal for fermenting into alcohol. And alcohol was life on the frontier. Water was often unsafe. Beer required grain settlers couldn't afford to spare. But cider? Cheap, easy, effective. Families drank it daily, even children. John was supplying essential liquid currency to the frontier, whether by design or divine calling. At the same time, he lived in tension with the world he supplied. Chapman rejected material comfort, wore discarded clothes, and slept outdoors. He read scripture aloud in camps, preached messages of nonviolence, and avoided harming animals. He was a follower of Swedenborgianism, a mystical Christian movement that believed nature was sacred and divine revelations were ongoing. So how could a man of peace fuel the spread of alcohol? That contradiction would later be erased. But in his lifetime, it made him a puzzle. This duality, part prophet, part businessman, placed him in a liminal space, loved by settlers, yet misunderstood, feared by some, followed by others. He walked through forests planting spiritual metaphors and legal proof of ownership at the same time. Was he trying to save the land or claim it? Was he driven by faith or profit? And why did his story become so sanitized later? As we peel away the layers, one truth becomes clear. Johnny Appleseed was never just a gardener of trees. He was a gardener of opportunity, and possibly a rebellion. By the early 1800s, John Chapman had created a network of orchards that spanned hundreds of miles. But these weren't your typical fruit farms. These orchards were filled with spitters, a slang term for apples so sour you'd spit them out after a single bite. They were useless for eating raw, but settlers didn't care. These apples were the base for hard cider, which became the most consumed drink in America at the time. Johnny wasn't spreading nutrition. He was spreading fermentation, and for some, that made him dangerous. It's no coincidence that the legend of Johnny Appleseed began to change during the Prohibition movement. Reformers, desperate to wipe out alcohol consumption, needed to reshape cultural icons. Chapman's real legacy, one soaked in cider, was sanitized. His orchards were reframed as symbols of purity. School books omitted his connection to alcohol. His image was softened, rounded, made safe. The truth was too inconvenient. America's gentle gardener was also the root system of its addiction. Ironically, Chapman himself wasn't a drinker. He rarely consumed alcohol, even discouraged others from abusing it. But he never condemned cider. In fact, he saw it as a gift to the earth, a sacred transformation of nature's bounty. His spiritual beliefs embraced the symbolic power of apples as vessels of change. To him, planting apple trees was a holy act. Even if society used the fruit for escape, he wasn't naive. He simply believed the land had its own agenda. The cider made from his apples became currency, communion, and comfort on the wild frontier. Weddings, funerals, births, all were toasted with cider. For many, it was safer than water and more available than milk. In this light, Johnny becomes not just a myth, but a paradox. A man of faith whose trees birthed both spiritual reverence and societal intoxication. He became folklore precisely because no one knew what to make of him. A man whose trees bore fruit and consequences. But the most haunting question remains. Why did America need to rewrite him? Was it guilt, nostalgia, or control? Was it easier to teach children about kindness than contradiction? The orchards Johnny left behind were later destroyed deliberately. Federal agents cut down his trees during Prohibition, erasing physical proof of the truth. And so, the forbidden orchard wasn't just metaphorical. It was real, and it was silenced. But the roots, like all legends, kept growing. There's something unsettling about Johnny's appearance. The pot on his head, the bare feet, the ragged clothing. These weren't quirks for children's stories. They were choices. To Swedenborgians like Chapman, material comfort was seen as vanity. He believed every element of nature had spiritual meaning. Walking barefoot was a sign of humility and connection with divine earth. The tin pot, a rejection of luxury, a symbol of self-reliance. But what happens when these signs are stripped of meaning and turned into cute details for classroom posters? The silence around Johnny's spiritual life is one of the most telling omissions in his legend. He wasn't just a wanderer, he was a preacher. He carried religious tracts, told stories of angels visiting Earth, and claimed to see divine purpose in every tree. To many settlers, he was a prophet, but to others, he was strange, a man who muttered verses, slept with animals, and avoided organized religion. As American identity hardened into pragmatism and industry, this mystical side of Johnny became inconvenient, so it vanished. Even the trees carry hidden meanings. Apples have long symbolized temptation, transformation, and knowledge, from Eden to fairy tales. Johnny's apples, bitter and intoxicating, became vessels of duality. They could nourish or numb, grow or corrupt. The cider they produced blurred the line between medicine and indulgence. Chapman believed that nature was sacred and that humans had a duty to protect it. Yet his legacy was co-opted into expansion and profit. A man planting metaphors became a man planting myths. The most tragic symbol may be the orchard itself. Once, it represented frontier hope and spiritual devotion. Later, it became a target, not of disease or decay, but of policy. When the government saw alcohol as a threat, it didn't just outlaw drinks. It destroyed trees. Thousands of apple orchards, many tied to Chapman's lineage, were chopped down. No protests, no ceremonies, just silence, as if cutting the roots would erase the truth. But some seeds survive fire. Some truths grow back stronger. And now we ask, what else have we turned into cartoons? How many legends were reshaped to serve agendas? Johnny's story was never about apples. It was about contradiction, the tension between belief and usefulness, purity and profit. He didn't fit in a textbook, so they edited him until he did. But the silence left behind speaks louder than any fairy tale. His life was a gospel of complexity, and every tree he planted whispered a truth too wild to teach children. Johnny Appleseed's story reminds us that legends are rarely simple. What we choose to remember and what we erase reveals as much about ourselves as about the past. America's need to sanitize his legacy was a desire for comfort, for a hero who fit neatly into textbooks and children's tales. But real heroes are messy, flawed, and often contradict their own myths. Johnny's orchards grew not just trees, but questions about faith, survival, and identity. The bitter apples he planted symbolize more than cider. They represent the tension between nature and culture, between freedom and control. Johnny's life was a dance between spiritual devotion and pragmatic survival, a reflection of the wild frontier itself. The government's efforts to destroy his orchards during Prohibition was an attempt to erase this complexity, to prefer a simpler story over the messy truth. Yet the roots run deeper than policy or myth. Today, Johnny's legacy survives in the whispers of those orchards and the stories passed down quietly by the land. His true mission might have been spiritual, but it was also revolutionary, a challenge to the neat boundaries society tries to impose. His life asks us to question how history is written, who decides which truths are told, and how much we lose in the process. What if the orchard we admire is just a mask for the wild growth beneath? The lesson from Johnny Appleseed's tale is that history needs us to look deeper, beyond the smiling portraits and simple morals. Real stories are complex and often uncomfortable. They demand we hold contradictions and embrace uncertainty. In understanding Johnny's true legacy, we see that growth comes with sacrifice, and that the seeds of truth sometimes bear bitter fruit before they can nourish. If the story changed how you see a familiar legend, imagine what else is hiding in the stories we think we know. History is not just what happened. It's what we choose to remember. And sometimes, remembering means facing the shadows alongside the light. Johnny Appleseed's story reminds us that legends are rarely simple. What we choose to remember and what we erase reveals as much about ourselves as about the past. America's need to sanitize his legacy was a desire for comfort, for a hero who fit neatly into textbooks and children's tales. But real heroes are messy, flawed, and often contradict their own myths. Johnny's orchards grew not just trees, but questions about faith, survival, and identity. The bitter apples he planted symbolize more than cider. They represent the tension between nature and culture, between freedom and control. Johnny's life was a dance between spiritual devotion and pragmatic survival, a reflection of the wild frontier itself. The government's efforts to destroy his orchards during Prohibition was an attempt to erase this complexity, to prefer a simpler story over the messy truth. Yet the roots run deeper than policy or myth. Today, Johnny's legacy survives in the whispers of those orchards and the stories passed down quietly by the land. His true mission might have been spiritual, but was also revolutionary, a challenge to the neat boundaries society tries to impose. His life asks us to question how history is written, who decides which truths are told, and how much we lose in the process. What if the orchard we admire is just a mask for wild growth beneath? The lesson from Johnny Appleseed's tale is that history needs us to look deeper, beyond the smiling portraits and simple morals. Real stories are complex and often uncomfortable. They demand we hold contradictions and embrace uncertainty. In understanding Johnny's true legacy, we see that growth comes with sacrifice, and that the seeds of truth sometimes bear bitter fruit before they can nourish. If this story changed how you see a familiar legend, imagine what else is hiding in the stories we think we know. History is not just what happened. It's what we choose to remember. And sometimes, remembering means facing the shadows alongside the light. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden truths behind Johnny Appleseed, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button to support more deep dives into the stories you thought you knew. Comment below with legends you want us to reveal next. Your suggestions guide our next explorations. Become a channel member to get exclusive content and help us continue this journey of truth and discovery. More stories like this are coming. Don't miss our next shocking revelation.